is if any of you could speak a little bit about how our relationships with animals play into this picture of the brain developing along the lines of compassion and empathy. If there's any insight there, any scientific work that's been done.
You know, we have co-evolved with animals for probably 40,000 years. I mean, there's a long history we have of living with animals literally in our homes. So the idea that you can invest, in terms of scientific point of view, a mental state into an animal, the animal has feelings, the animal has needs that you can perceive, will generate in us, whether it's as adults or adolescents or as children, this feeling like there's another being in the world outside of this body, and that being has all these inner experiences that need to be respected and cared for. So at a very basic level, it's going to increase the really important capacity, this mind-sight capacity to see the mind of another, this empathy. And then when you see sometimes the animal in your life is suffering, then of course helping them reduce the suffering is bringing empathy to the action, which would be an act of kindness, and where you're, the way I define kindness is honoring and supporting one another's vulnerability. So you see that the animal has vulnerable inner authentic needs. And compassion, how does compassion differ from kindness? Compassion would be sensing the experience of another, thinking about what that experience is and how you might help, and then skillfully taking action to help, those three things, so that you build on empathy to then also be kind and compassionate. So animals would be great that way. It's also part of a larger frame of studies that are now coming out about the profound importance of nature, of being outside of just human-made environments. And there's all sorts of studies about that, about our ability to focus attention, our feeling of well-being, our sense of, awe in the world really requires that we get out of just human-made environments. And animals, of course, are a part of that. So does that touch on some of the things you had in mind? And, in terms of the questions you may have, as an adolescent inside of me, I would say you may have feelings that aren't really even a question, and just sharing them with the group, there's probably a lot of other people here with that. I know there are 2 people here when I was doing a longer time of talking about adolescents who've come here for that reason. And, there's so much about the adolescent period, and the reason I think I'm inviting us all to think about just expressing a feeling is you might find that sharing it and articulating it is a good way to actually explore together what you may be wondering about, but it isn't exactly a question.
Our brain's ability to exhibit neuroplasticity, does that peak during a young age or adolescence? And is that the best time to learn a new language or values like empathy and kindness?
Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain and its connections to change in response to experience. So that begins when we're in the womb, when we're still not out in the world yet. It continues throughout childhood. Something very special happens in adolescence where instead of, as the video showed, being a generalist where you're soaking in everything, you do begin to specialize. So in terms of your question about learning kindness and compassion, we can learn it at any time. There's a book I wrote called Mindsight where I talk about a 92-year-old who didn't have much of that, and he had to actually work to develop it, and he could because the brain continues to change throughout the lifespan. But I think one reason to keep in mind why you, at your age as adolescents, have such an important role to play, not only in your own personal development, but in the future of your lives together as a group, but also the future of humanity and even the future of the planet, is because of exactly what you're asking about. There are changes that are now happening in your brains that are, in a sense, designed to push against the status quo. And just like in Kelsey's fantastic presentation, wasn't that amazing to hear that stuff about the random acts of kindness and the way you took the struggles and thought you could actually do something positive about it? The adolescent brain, all of your brains, are actually designed by evolution to push against the status quo. When you get to be an adult, you find your kind of specialized area, you're really, really tired, you find your niche in what you do, and you want to come home and just watch some TV, and that's it, you're exhausted. But the world is forever changing, And it's your brains, adolescent brains, that are designed to take on the challenges of the world, and compassion and kindness being central, I think, to how we have to approach things. And so in a way, the world is waiting for you, even though you may feel that, oh, I'm just like an adolescent, what can I do? Or you may be told, oh, your rebellion is not good or something. The fact is, this planet needs exactly what you have to offer. And that's really the excitement I had about being here today with you, is to let you know that, because once you understand that, it's a total change in what the society has been telling all of us about adolescence. It is a really important point for just your issue. The neuroplasticity that's happening now, the changes in your brain is shaped by you. And if you change it in a way that can promote gross national happiness, you can really, literally change the world from the inside out.
I'm going to school right now for a bachelor's, but I'm studying entrepreneurship and innovation and environmental studies so that I can own my own environmentally sustainable bridal jewelry business. And it's something so specific. It's something that I'm not totally sure it exists yet, but I'm going to make it exist. And I've been making jewelry since I was 11. I made it through high school, and just never stop doing what you love, because there is a place for you to do exactly what you want in the world. So just keep dreaming.
Compassion and kindness, they're often linked with a sense of idealism or naivety. So my question to you is, how do you reconcile these goals with an often more pragmatic world which doesn't see them as necessary?
I'll say something briefly, and I suspect Julia might have something else to add. I think that's really the question. It's pretty straightforward to be nice to people you like, right? It's also pretty straightforward to be strong, firm, assertive, fiery, even outraged. But to bring those together, to bring strength and heart together, the wolf of love, the wolf of hate, but together, that's really, I think, the sweet spot, and it's one that really interests me. And I think I had two suggestions about it. One is that it really works to fill ourselves up first. If we feel like we're running on empty, we're going to lose it. We're not going to be so skillful. We're going to pour gas on the fire. We're going to look like a fool. We're going to lose our power, right? Fill ourselves up. And one way to fill ourselves up is through loving others, because it's weirdly nurturing to oneself to be caring toward other people. But in other ways, look for ways to fill oneself up. That's, to me, I think, really important. The second is something I've been really exploring lately, is how quick it is, how easy it is to no longer see the being behind the eyes in the other person, how fast it is to just turn them into an it. There's this model of relationships from Martin Buber, you may have heard of it. It says there are three kinds of relationships: I, thou, I, it, and it, right? And as soon as we lose a sense of the other as a person, boom, they're an it to us. Now, you can see the other as a thou and want to beat their football team. You can see the other as a thou and want to compete with them for the guy, the girl you're interested in. You can see them as a thou and want to get the job instead of them, competing for a job. You know, there's a place for that. You can see the other as a thou, and you really disagree with them, and you vote against them, and you mobilize against them. But I have a teacher who says, you know, put them out of your company, put them out of your White House, put them out of your government, put them out of your bedroom, put them out of your bed, but never put them out of your heart. And I think that's the art as well, to sustain a sense of strength over here while continuing to see the other as a thou over there. And that's a lifelong practice, but a profoundly important one, especially for what the world needs today.
Thanks. I think that's a really good question. I was almost going to turn it around to you guys and ask, having heard all of this morning, do you kind of leave here going, compassion, is that really realistic? I got to go back to school and do my homework and get my grades. But I think it's really interesting that, a country like Bhutan managed to get the word happiness into the United Nations at a time when the UN was asking, how should we measure progress? And it's not because it's this touchy, feel-good feeling. It's because we are at this time of crisis right now. It came to the United States at the time that we had the financial crisis, and a lot of people were losing their houses, were going into debt in this country. It came at a time when we were really saying global warming is no longer just a myth. We know it's really happening. And so happiness and well-being isn't just a luxury anymore. It's actually critical to our survival, both in the way that we're talking about as individuals and as a planet. And so I think it's interesting that a whole country, it's a small country, but it's a whole country, is trying to reorient their whole society and their economy around happiness. And what does that look like on a practical level? It means that starting in school, they're not just teaching kids to get the best grades and to pass tests, but they're doing, what Dan and others were talking about, in terms of social and emotional learning. How do you cooperate to solve a math problem? How do you create something in the classroom rather than just try to get the best results? When kids are starting to graduate in Bhutan, they're starting to also face higher levels of unemployment, just as you're seeing around the world. And instead of just saying maybe we need to produce smarter kids, they're saying maybe we got to look at what kind of jobs are out there. Because just getting good grades is not enough anymore. The jobs that are out there don't need another person with great computer skills. But what we do need are people who can look at, can we make organic farming a viable job for people? Can we make creating music and keeping our cultures and our dances alive part of the job economy? And so Bhutan is trying to say, let's make the economy shape what makes people happy. So some of the young people in our programs at Bhutan, one of them is a young organic farmer. He's kind of the first in that country. He's kind of in his late 20s, who's now creating a whole job market and economy around organic farming. He's making his own organic potato chips. He's getting them out to schools. Instead of ordering food, like if we had a conference like this, instead of ordering it from a big company, they'll order it from him, and he'll hire a lot of his friends who use organic ingredients to cater this kind of a meeting. Another one of his buddies started the first green recycling program in Bhutan. The country didn't really have a way of disposing of plastic and waste. They've only recently started using plastic packaging for foods. They used to use leaves and biodegradable things like that. But now they've got more plastic waste coming in from India. So he's created a whole project around recycling that and then shipping it back to India so it can be reused. And he's hiring a lot of young people to do that. So I think, two answers to that. One is that being kind, being compassionate, and looking after happiness is not actually naive anymore. It's kind of a survival strategy for us as a planet. And number two, I think it's possible. When Kelsey and others were talking about being creative, being the change makers in the world, why do we have to keep following in the same path when we see it's not actually going to lead to a sustainable future? So I don't think it's so far out of the box to talk about happiness and compassion and kindness as a survival strategy, as something that's really practical rather than pie in the sky kind of dreaming. That's a great question, though. Thanks for asking it.
So for me, I'm very idealistic, and I feel like it's almost overwhelming to think about everything going on in the world and like how can you as one person tackle that, and is it even attainable? And the thing that I say, the phrase all the time is do what you can with what you have where you are, right? So pick something you care about. Like I have this thing that I want to change, whether it's this organic farming or recycling, something you care about, and then just think, what skill sets do I have? Am I a good writer? Am I good at gathering people? Am I awesome at social media? Am I a musician, right? And then just take what you already do well and do it for good, right? Do it for social good. And then I think it makes it, if more and more people did that and just incorporated it into what you're already doing, then it's that much easier for, the world to survive and end up kind of changing what our reality currently is. So, good question.
Okay, I had a question regarding the school environment and adolescents' development of this feeling of morality and a moral compass. So, in the context of school and stress environment, how do you think that kindness would correlate with people's feelings of morality in cases in the classroom, such as cheating, or like feelings of discipline?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really important question, and it actually builds on what everyone's saying. What the last comments from Kelsey. You know, the environment in school that you're referring to that would be so pressured, or let me ask you, how many of you are in middle school right now? Okay, how many of you in high school? Okay, how many of you feel pressure in high school? Okay, and how many feel stress in high school? Okay, how many of you feel a sense of competition in high school? All right, so you can see it's basically everybody. So that environment is not the environment that, in terms of the prior question, would be supporting, for example, collaboration, would be supporting creativity and innovation, would be supporting the idea that when you work on your insides, this inner transformation we're talking about, you would realize the most important thing about education is actually to love learning and explore with curiosity things that are going to benefit other people, yourself, the world. But that's not what's in school, right? It's get a better grade than the person sitting on either side of you, so you can do what? Get into a better, what? College, the most competitive college, so you can get into the most competitive graveyard you can get into. This is like, because the research actually shows it doesn't matter where you go to university, if you're going to go to college or university. It actually doesn't matter. Now, people freak out about that because you want to think it does matter, because you want something to matter, because the world is so uncertain. At least you've had a grade point average, that matters, or your SAT scores, that matters. It actually doesn't. I don't want to freak anyone out, but it actually doesn't matter. What matters is exactly what Kelsey was just saying, and this is about the morality thing. If we turn it around, and we meaning all of us in this room, where we say, look, as Dr. Kim was saying, it isn't really about competition where you beat it out and you produce a lot of products, so you get the most money, and then of course you get X amount of money and you're not happy, so you think, well, what should I do? Make double X, right? So I make double X amount of money and I'm still unhappy, so then what do you think? Make 4 times X. And meanwhile, you're just basically destroying yourself and the planet. But it's all about competition. So this is a complete change in the framework in terms of morality, literally of saying the moral way to be is to realize it's a deep way of learning about the world. And so in terms of the prior question, it seems soft from the system that maybe you're immersed in, but from all of the science that's being talked about just down the street, and all the science that we know about, the way it has been and the way schools are structured now is not working. It's not working. That experiment has been done to make a world which just produces with the GDP is actually destroying the planet. And there's no time like the present to actually switch it around. So kindness is important because if it's defined as realizing we're all vulnerable and then supporting and honoring one another's vulnerability, what that means is the game is over. We can't just pretend that being competitive and getting a high GPA or high SAT and getting a high this or high that is actually the thing. It's not the thing. The thing is about compassion, that is feeling inside of yourself and learning the skills that Dr. Hansen was teaching us and teaches us, and that Mackenzie talked about, the idea that you're actually aware of what's going on inside, so instead of just putting on a face, you know from the inside out what's going on. And then what we could do is switch it all around. So then it isn't just like beating someone on the head and saying, don't cheat. It's you realize that cheating actually hurts you more than anyone. So then from the inside out, this is what we mean, that inner awareness, you go, I want to learn more. I'm not ready for this test. And then everyone around you, like what happens in Finland, is they have like the highest scores around, but what they have is collaboration. It's all about supporting each other. And if people are competitive, why don't we set it up where you set up the world's most challenging problems, climate change issues, famine, the fact that there's so much pollution in the world, violence, and then have people compete against the world problem. So then if you win the competition, everybody benefits. That's the kind of thing about collaboration we can create. And it's doable. We just have to take a step outside the system and realize it's time for the system to change.
Mm-hmm. But also, like, how do you think we can influence other people, like all of our peers, to change their mindset? Because it's a very individualistic mindset that you have to change for yourself, but then how would we be able to implement that like school-wide?
Just speaking from personal experience for myself, I got like B's and C's in high school. It was all weighted classes, but I was the dumb one. And so it's just, I wish that people would have supported me, and if I got a C on a test, that it would be like, oh, it's okay, you've been doing a lot lately, or it was really hard, or just support each other, because then I wouldn't feel so bad about myself that it's like, if I cheat, I can get an A, and then when my professor hands back the test, then I don't have to hide it. So I think it's just a lot of support, that it's okay if everyone doesn't get good grades, and it's okay if not every subject is your best subject. Just do your best and try not to. I think that if people didn't judge each other as much based off of their grades, then I think that there'd be less cheating. Because for me, anytime I wanted to, it was because I was embarrassed. But I did the best I could, so that's just my opinion.
I'll just add one teeny thing, then I'll pass to Kelsey. In the book Brainstorm, it slowly presents to the adolescent reading it and the adult reading it exactly what your question is, which is, how do you actually transform things? So in schools where they're having the parents read it, the teachers read it, and the students read it, then it's a very natural thing, because the science is all there that we're talking about here, that says we can't go on with the system as it was. Now, why do we need the science to say that? Because we kind of know it intuitively. Because for the adults who want to hear you say, well, I think I need to be kind and compassionate, they say, oh, that's just soft stuff. You can now, after this meeting today, you can say, actually, no. This is the most rigorous science exists to show that well-being and health for me as a person, a private person, is going to come from me being kind and being compassionate. And you say to that adult who says it's soft stuff, say, actually, it isn't. You're mistaken. And from this day onward, you can have the strength of saying that. That's why we need books. Like there's a wonderful book called The Age of Opportunity by Larry Steinberg that talks about it too. And it's a big shift, but you need to have the backup of science so you can stand up and say, there's a lot behind what I'm saying right now. Even though what you're saying is ultimately very simple, there's a huge amount of complex science that supports it that didn't exist, let's say, 30 years ago.
That's a great question. So, and building off of what both of you have said, I think there's two things that have to happen. So one is identifying why maybe it's not happening already in your school. So, or why are people automatically switching to the negative, or why is there not a culture of kindness in your school? So identifying that, is it because people think it's soft and fluffy? Do people think, is it not there because you think somebody's going to bully you, or think that you're a doormat if you're nice and they can walk all over you, kind of thing? So identifying those items of why is it not already happening, and then from there looking at your resources. Again, it's the do what you can with what you have where you are, right? So ideally, if the whole school could get involved, that's great. If you feel like that's not, your school's not ready for that, look at maybe there's a student leadership group or a teacher who agrees with you, and start a group there of people doing it, because action inspires action, right? And if someone sees you doing good things, then they may be inspired to do it as well, and then it can go school-wide. And we have, I didn't mention this in our presentation, on randomactskindness.org we have free materials for teachers, so lesson plans. It's K through 12, so there's high school in there as well. And then we also have kindness club guides and stuff like that to get you started. So if you're interested at all, it's just looking at where can I start, and then what do I need to say so that it overcomes whatever people already think about, why kindness shouldn't be here, if that makes sense. I don't know if I answered that for you correctly, but good question.
Hi, Mackenzie, I have a question for you. Your story was very amazing and inspiring, but I guess my question is, what is your go-to happiness? If you're having one of those bad days and you're just I'm gonna do this because I know this will make me feel better. What is that for you?
Well, I've had a lot of bad days, so I've had to change my methods a lot. I think my newest thing, my favorite thing to do now is I have this thing that I call my happy book, and I collect really lame jokes, which Michael has witnessed, and I write them in the book. I write quotes that make me feel better. I write compliments that people give me, which, you know, you guys complimented my speech. It's going in my happy book. And then when I'm, thank you. And when I have a bad day, it's, you know, I can read compliments that people have given me and think, you know, okay, you know, I've done good things so I can feel better about myself. Or when I get a compliment from a professor, and if I'm sad about a bad grade, it's like, well, I did good this one time, I know I can do it again. But it's just any, like, silly things usually cheer me up, like lame jokes or painting my nails, but it's just personal to whatever you are, and the method changes a lot, but I like my happy book.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
You know, a tradition I come from talks about the importance of refuge, right? Safe place. Where do you go inside yourself when things are tough? And I was just thinking that, you know, when I was, I remember my youth really, really well, because a lot of it was painful. And one thing that was true is that I knew things that other people were telling me were not true. You know, I knew things about my family, I knew things about how my parents really were, I knew things about the other kids in school, and there was a lot of blather coming at me. And I think it goes to your point as well. Sometimes you just can't change the situation around you, right? You're outnumbered, you're outgunned, whatever, but you can hold on and make sacred what you know in your heart is true. That's a profound refuge right there. Even when things are crazy around you, deep in your heart, even if everybody's denying it, you know it's true. You really know it's true. And it's so easy to lie to ourselves and to kind of lose faith with what we truly know in our heart is true. That's such a profoundly important refuge, and no one can take it from you. Only you can take it from you, right? And you can always go home to what you know is true. And the other great refuge, I think, which really does go to unhappiness or bad days, is to know in your bones that you're a good person. You're not a perfect person, no saying I'm not a perfect person, but it's been a real step for me to really acknowledge to myself in my bones the same thing I would see about other people. It's so easy to casually look at others and go, yeah, you're basically a good person. But to say that to ourselves and to stand up for that inside ourselves, whoa, it's kind of like one of the last taboos. So that's the second key refuge here. No matter how crazy it is out there, or what kind of, you know, flop you've had recently, or bad grade you've gotten, or someone doesn't want to like you in the same way you want to like them, bottom line, you can still take refuge in knowing that you're a fundamentally good person.
Hi. I had a question for Mackenzie as well. I was wondering how, when you were fighting with depression, how you overcame that. I mean, probably there were days when you were still really struggling with it, and like how, what were strategies you did to, you know, make it through like every day, you know, when you're feeling?
Well, I have an interesting way of dealing with depression, I guess, is I just tend to take it all inside. And people cannot tell from the outside if I'm having a bad day, and I keep it very internal. And when I start to make it through, and I actually, to clarify, I do still battle depression, and I do still have bad days, but the way that I can get over my little, you know, spells faster now is that I reach out to people, and I try. It takes so much effort to open up and to like tell my roommates, I'm really feeling it today, guys. I'm just not feeling like myself. And just reaching out to people and talking about it, even if they don't know what to say back, because people rarely do know what to say to that, it helps release some of the burden of feeling it myself. I also go to therapy, and I'm very open about that. I don't let anyone say that, you're crazy for going to therapy, because it's a lot of effort and a lot of time. And I learned so much about myself, and it's one of the best things that I've ever done for myself is go to therapy. It's just made me a much better person. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It just sometimes, you know, people aren't always going to be able to be there for you, and sometimes, usually, I think people, you know, hold whatever. But it's just like, oh, sorry.
So before I ask my question, people were wondering how to deal with bad days. I don't know. I have a thing where it's called my accomplishment jar, where you can get a jar and, I don't know, decorate it if you want to. And every big accomplishment that you have, you can write it and put it in your jar, and then you can read them when you have a bad day. So, okay. And so my question is, as I am a highly competitive person, and so I was thinking about what some of you had said, and I was thinking that a lot of competition, I noticed that I do this, and I've seen other people do this in school or sports or things like that, is their competition is very negative, and their competition is putting other people down so they can get in first place. So I was just wondering how you could have a positive competition strategy.
How about competing to be the kindest person that you could be? No, I think it's a natural impulse to want to excel, to be good at something. But the things that we're told that we should be competing for and excelling in, it's sometimes good to reflect, do we actually believe in it, So is it really the thing that we should be competing to be the fastest, the one who gets the best grades, the one who always has the wittiest remark, the one who's got the latest fashions, the one who's got the biggest iPhone? Are those the things that are worth competing for? Right? Or if we want to excel, are there other things, like being a really kind person, being the one that people go to when they have a problem and they know they'll really get heard? So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be your best and to really fulfill your potential as a human being. But I think we get a lot of stuff from the media and from advertising, from music and movies and popular culture that says this is what you should be good at, this is what it means to be good at. So I think taking that impulse and wanting to be the best is fine, but it's asking the best at what? And I think that could be a really, really interesting discussion. A lot of the kids that I work with in Bhutan, they are actually growing up in a culture where they're taught very young about interdependence, that everything that they do impacts the world around them, not even in the things that they can see, but even in the invisible things. And so when I sit with them and I ask, what are the things that you worry about? What are the things that you care about? They really are thinking about their impact on the people around them. They start with their best friend or their family, but then they bring it out a little bit and start talking about what's happening in the natural world and in the environment. And so I think it's fine to be wanting to be really excellent at something, but think about what you want to be really good at. And I think one of the things that we're looking at in education now is the fact that the way education was developed in the past, it was really designed to get people into factories and to be not ask too many questions, get the job done, and be very efficient. And lately, it's been a huge emphasis on math and sciences as being the things that everybody should be good at. And it ignores a lot of the things that other people are naturally good at and love: arts, music, language, communication, helping. And so I think, again, looking at what we're grading and what we're evaluating in the school system as being excellent is a kind of phase that we're going through in education right now. And so I think just because you're not getting the top grades in the math and sciences doesn't mean that you don't have a lot of other talents and skills that are really useful in the world. So there's nothing wrong with valuing things, but I think it's time to start asking, what do we value and why?
Thank you everyone so much for coming up here, and let's give I'm sorry we're out of time.